Hello dear students, good morning to all. This is the continuation of chapter 3. We have discussed in the last class different types of adjectives, and today we are going to deal with the phrases and clauses, page number 35, and there you can see two boxes given there, the definition of phrases and clauses. Let us just read it. A phrase is a group of words which conveys some meaning but does not make complete sense. A phrase does not have a finite verb or a subject of its own. Let us look at the clause. A clause is a group of words that has a subject and a finite verb. Dear students, before going to the explanation of these two concepts, I will just tell you some of the similarities and some of the differences between these phrases and clauses. Phrase and clause, both are a group of words. Phrase is a group of words and clause is also a group of words. The difference is that phrase may not be having a finite verb. That means there will not be a main verb. There can be non-finite verbs. We have studied what is a non-finite verb. There are three types of non-finite verbs are there: gerund, participle and infinitives. So I will not be explaining those three things. So finite verb means that is the main verb which change according to the tense. Non-finite verbs will not be changing as per the tense. It will be the same as in all the tense. So phrase is a group of words. It gives a sense, but it will not be giving a complete sense. It helps the sentence to complete the meaning of the sentence, but it will not, when we look at this phrase alone, individually, it will not be having a perfect meaning, as well as it will not be having a subject or a finite verb. But when we look at the clause also a group of words, but it will have a subject and a finite verb. So the clause, there can be a main clause, there can be a subordinate clause, and both clauses will be having the first part of the sentence and the second part of the sentences will be having a subject and a finite verb. But the subordinate clause will complete its meaning with the help of the main clause. Now let us look at the examples and you will be able to understand its concept. First of all, she was my first student. I looked at her face. Here in this sentence, my first student, at her face, these are phrases. The words my first student and at her face give additional information about the sentence, but they do not make a complete sense on their own. That means if we look at my first student, so it will not be giving a perfect meaning. She was my first student, then the meaning is completed. So it will not make a complete sense on their own. These are known as phrases. When we look at the another example, I saw the picture that accompanied the story. I saw the picture. So when we take only this part, I saw the picture, the meaning is clear. That accompanied the story. I saw the picture that accompanied the story. So there a finite verb accompanied, and in the first part, I saw the picture, the main verb is saw. So in both clauses there is finite verbs. So here the underlined part, I saw the picture, has the subject I and the finite verb is saw, and it is a clause. Let us look at the differences between the main clause and subordinate clause. The next example given in our textbook is, we waited for the bus which came with the papers. We waited for the bus which came with the papers. There are two parts for this sentence. The first part is, we waited for the bus. Second part is, which came with the papers. So in the second part we can see that came is a verb, and in the first part waited, that's also is a verb. So the first part is a clause, second part also is a clause. In the first part the subject is we, in the second part the subject is which, that is the relative pronoun used there. So the second part of the sentence is the subordinate clause. Let us take the second part of the sentence alone, which came with the papers. We don't get a clear meaning. Its meaning is not perfect. But let us take the first part alone, we waited for the bus. there the meaning is clear and we get a perfect meaning. But which came with the paper requires the main clause to complete the meaning. Once again, the second part of the sentence, which is called as a subordinate clause, which came with the papers, need a main clause to complete its meaning. Let us see, in this sentence, the underlined part we waited for the bus is a main clause because it has the subject we, the finite verb waited, and makes complete sense by itself. The part which came with the purpose is a subordinate clause because though it has a finite verb came, it depends on the rest of the sentence to make complete a sentence, to make a complete sense. Let us look at some of the examples. I will be discussing one or two exercises given there. Thereafter, remaining exercises, I request the students to find the answers. So here the question is, write whether the underlined words are phrases or clauses. In case of a clause, mention whether it is a main clause or a subordinate clause. Let us take the first one. Pew bought a puppy from a friend. Pew bought a puppy from a friend. How do we find out whether it is a clause or a phrase? Let us take the underlined part first. Pew bought a puppy. There you can see Pew, a subject, the person who has done the action. And which is the action there? Pew bought a puppy. Bought is the action. So it has a subject and a verb. So it is clear that it is a clause. Let us look at the remaining part of the sentence. From a friend. From a friend. There is no verb. That is just to merely mention from a friend. There is no subject or verb. So that is not a clause. So as there is only one clause, we don't need to mention that whether it is a main clause or a subordinate clause. There is no subordinate clause because the second part of the sentence is not a clause because there is no subject or a verb. That is actually an adverb. So we don't need to write whether it is a clause or a subordinate clause or a main clause. So here the underlined part of the sentence is a clause. That's enough. Let us go to the second exercise. We all ran into the garden when we saw the butterflies. We all ran to the garden when we saw the butterflies. Let us look at the underlined part of the sentence. When we saw the butterflies, there you can see the action word saw. So is the verb. So there is a verb. And when is used as the when we saw the butterflies. We is the subject. We saw the butterflies. So it's a clause. Then we have to find out whether it is a subordinate clause or a main clause. Let us look at the first part of the sentence and find out whether it is a clause or not. We all ran into the garden. We is the subject. Run is the action. So there also subject and verb. In second part of the sentence also there is a subject and verb. So both parts are clauses. The first part is a clause, second part also is a clause. So we have to find out which is the main clause, which is the subordinate clause. Let us take the meaning of then we have to look at the meaning of the sentence. Let us take the first part. We all ran into the garden. We all ran into the garden. There the meaning is clear. It does not require any other sentence to complete its meaning. Let us look at the second part of the sentence. When we saw the butterflies, its meaning is not complete. It requires the first part of the sentence to complete the meaning of the sentence. That means the second part of the sentence is a subordinate clause. The first part of the sentence is the main clause because the subordinate clause is dependent on the first part of the sentence. That's why subordinate clause is also called as dependent clause, and main clause is called as dependent clause. And so here we all ran into the garden is the main clause or independent clause. The second part of the sentence, when we saw the butterflies, that is the dependent clause or the subordinate clause. Let us look at the sixth example. She saw her cat a minute ago. She saw her cat a minute ago. So in this sentence, let us see the first one. The first part of the sentence. She saw her cat. There is a subject she, and what action is taken place? Saw. So there is a subject and verb. So the first part of the sentence is a clause. Let us look at the underlined one. A minute ago. There is no subject. There is no verb. So it is a phrase. It is a phrase. I think the same as in the first sentence also. From a friend is a phrase. From a friend is a phrase. That is not a clause, that is a phrase. So maybe mistakenly they might have underlined this one. So anyway,